But he noticed her. He noticed the way her hands shook as she counted. He noticed the worn shoes on her feet. And when she turned slightly, reaching for the cheapest pack of diapers on the lowest shelf, he noticed her face. His heart stopped. Because that face, that tired, broken, beautiful face, belonged to the woman he had once promised to love forever. The woman who had disappeared from his life 8 years ago without a single word. The woman he had searched for, mourned for, and eventually tried to forget. And now, here she was, in a 24-hour pharmacy at nearly midnight, counting pennies for diapers. His mind raced with 1,000 questions, but one burned hotter than all the rest. Whose baby? What Marcus Bennett was about to discover would shatter everything he believed about his past, his choices, and the empire he had built on the ashes of his broken heart. Because the truth wasn't just shocking, it was devastating, and it had been waiting for him all along. To understand how we arrived at this moment, we need to go back to a time before the penthouse apartments and private jets, back before the billion-dollar deals and the magazine covers, back to when Marcus Bennett was just a young man with big dreams and an even bigger heart, and when Clara Simmons was the love of his life. They met in college. She was studying nursing. He was studying business. She came from a small town in Ohio, the daughter of a factory worker and a school teacher. He came from money, old money, the kind that came with expectations, conditions, and chains disguised as privilege. His family owned Bennett Industries, a massive conglomerate that had its fingers in real estate, technology, and pharmaceuticals. Marcus was the only son, the heir apparent, and every day of his life had been planned since before he was born. But Clara didn't care about any of that. She loved him for his laugh, for the way he stayed up late helping his roommate study, for the sandwiches he made her when she forgot to eat during exam week. She loved the Marcus who existed outside of the Bennett name, the one who dreamed of building something of his own, something meaningful. And he loved her for seeing that person when everyone else only saw dollar signs and inheritance. For 3 years, they built a world together, a small apartment off campus, Sunday morning pancakes, long walks where they talked about everything and nothing. He introduced her to classical music. She introduced him to her grandmother's pie recipe. They were happy, genuinely, completely happy. But happiness, as Clara would learn, is a fragile thing when it threatens the plans of powerful people. Marcus's mother, Victoria Bennett, was a woman carved from ice and ambition. She had married into the Bennett family at 22 and had spent the next 40 years protecting the empire with the ferocity of a general. She had one goal for her son. He would marry Evelyn Crane, the daughter of the Crane banking family. It was a merger disguised as a marriage, a business deal wrapped in white lace. And Victoria had been planning it since Marcus was in elementary school. When she learned about Clara, the nobody from Ohio, the nursing student with no connections and no fortune, she didn't rage, she didn't threaten. Victoria Bennett was far too strategic for that. Instead, she waited, she watched, and when the time was right, she struck. It happened during Marcus's senior year. Clara had just been accepted into a prestigious nursing program, one that would allow her to specialize in pediatric care. She was overjoyed. Marcus was proud. They talked about the future, getting married after graduation, finding a small house, building a life together brick by brick. And then Clara got the call. Her father had been in an accident at the factory. He was alive but badly injured. The medical bills were astronomical. Her mother was working double shifts just to keep the electricity on. Clara needed to go home. She needed to help. Marcus wanted to help too. He offered money, his trust fund, whatever it took. But Clara said no. She had always been proud, always determined to stand on her own 2 feet. She said she would figure it out. She said she would come back. She never did. For months, Marcus waited. He called, he texted, he sent letters. but every attempt to reach her was met with silence. Her phone was disconnected. Her email bounced back. Her family's home number was no longer in service. It was as if Clara Simmons had vanished from the face of the earth. What Marcus didn't know, what he wouldn't know for 8 long years, was that his mother had made it happen. Victoria Bennett had hired a private investigator the moment she learned about Clara's family troubles. She gathered every detail: the hospital bills, the credit card debt, the second mortgage on the family home. And then she made Clara an offer she couldn't refuse: $200,000, enough to pay for her father's surgeries, clear the debts, and give her family a fresh start. But there were conditions. Clara had to leave Marcus immediately. She could never contact him again. She could never tell him the truth. And she had to sign a non-disclosure agreement that would destroy her family financially if she ever breathed a word of the arrangement. Clara was devastated. She loved Marcus more than she had ever loved anyone. The thought of leaving him felt like tearing her own heart out of her chest. But her father was lying in a hospital bed, and her mother was crying at the kitchen table, and her little brother needed braces and school supplies and a future. How could she choose her own happiness over their survival? So she signed, she took the money, and she walked away from the only man she ever loved, carrying a secret that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Because what Clara didn't know, what she wouldn't discover until 2 months later, was that she was pregnant. The baby was a girl. Clara named her Lily, after her grandmother who had passed away when Clara was young. Lily came into the world on a cold February morning with her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. She was perfect. She was a miracle. And she was the most painful reminder imaginable of everything Clara had lost. Those first years were hard, impossibly hard. Clara couldn't go back to nursing school. She had a newborn and no savings. The money Victoria had given her was gone, swallowed by her father's medical bills and the debts that just kept coming. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, waitressing, cleaning houses, night shifts at a call center, anything to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. She moved often. She had to. Victoria had made it clear that if Clara ever tried to contact Marcus, if she ever revealed the truth, there would be consequences. And Clara believed her. She had seen the coldness in that woman's eyes, the calculation behind every word. Victoria Bennett was not someone who made empty threats. So Clara stayed hidden. She used her mother's maiden name. She avoided social media. She kept her head down and focused on survival. And through it all, she raised Lily. Lily, who was smart and curious and kind. Lily, who asked why they had to move so much. Lily, who wondered why she didn't have a daddy like the other kids at school. Clara told her that her father was gone, that he had loved her very much, but that he was no longer part of their lives. It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. Marcus had loved her. Clara was sure of that. And he was gone from their lives. The details in between were too painful to explain. As the years passed, Clara aged in ways that went beyond time. She was only 32, but she felt ancient. The stress, the poverty, the constant fear of being discovered, it all took its toll. She developed health problems. Her back ached from years of physical labor. Her teeth needed work she couldn't afford. And then, 3 months ago, came the diagnosis that changed everything. Stage 3 cervical cancer. The doctor said it with clinical detachment, as if he were reading a weather report. Clara sat in that sterile office, staring at the wall, trying to process words that didn't make sense. Cancer, stage 3, aggressive, treatment options, survival rates. It all blurred together into a fog of terror and disbelief. She had health insurance. Barely. A minimal plan that covered almost nothing. The treatments she needed would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, money she didn't have, money she would never have. For the first time in 8 years, Clara considered breaking her silence. She thought about reaching out to Marcus, telling him everything, begging for help. But every time she picked up the phone, she saw Victoria's face in her mind. She remembered the contract she had signed. She remembered the threats. And she put the phone back down. She would figure it out. She always did. Except this time she couldn't. The treatments were expensive, even the reduced ones at the charity clinic. She had to cut back on hours at work, which meant less money coming in. The bills piled up. The refrigerator grew emptier. And then 2 weeks ago her landlord served her with an eviction notice. That was when Lily stepped in. Lily Bennett Simmons was 7 years old, but she had the soul of someone much older. She had watched her mother struggle her entire life. She had seen the way Clara's eyes filled with tears when she thought no one was looking. She had heard the late-night phone calls, the desperate negotiations with bill collectors, the quiet prayers whispered in the darkness. And she understood, in the way that children sometimes understand things that adults try to hide, that her mother was very sick. It started with the fatigue. Clara would come home from work and collapse on the couch, too tired to make dinner, too tired to help with homework, too tired to do anything but sleep. Then came the appointments. So many appointments. Lily would sit in waiting rooms, swinging her legs on plastic chairs, watching her mother disappear behind doors with serious-faced doctors. Then came the throwing up, the hair falling out, the days when Clara couldn't get out of bed at all. Lily tried to help. She made peanut butter sandwiches for dinner. She learned to use the washing machine. She walked to school by herself when her mother couldn't drive. And every night she prayed to whoever was listening that her mommy would get better. But prayers, she was learning, didn't pay for medicine. The eviction notice was the breaking point. Clara tried to hide it, but Lily found the paper in the trash, covered in coffee grounds and eggshells. She couldn't read all the words, but she understood enough. They were going to lose their home. Again. That night Lily lay awake in her small bed, thinking harder than she had ever thought before. There had to be a way to help. There had to be someone who could fix this. And then, like a puzzle piece clicking into place, she remembered something. A conversation from years ago. A name her mother had whispered in her sleep. A face from a photograph that Clara kept hidden in a shoebox at the back of her closet. Marcus. Lily didn't know who Marcus was, not really. But she knew he was important. She knew her mother cried whenever she looked at that photograph. And she knew, with the certainty of a child who has no other options, that Marcus might be the only person who could save them. The next day, while her mother slept through another bout of nausea, Lily found the photograph. It showed a young couple, arms wrapped around each other, smiling like the world was made of pure joy. On the back, someone had written a date and a name, Marcus Bennett, 2015. Lily didn't know how to find someone from a photograph, but she knew something that most 7-year-olds didn't, how to use the internet. Her mother had taught her safety rules, educational websites, nothing dangerous. But desperate times called for desperate measures. She typed the name into the search bar, Marcus Bennett. The results made her gasp. Pages and pages of articles, pictures of a man in expensive suits, standing in front of skyscrapers and shaking hands with presidents, headlines about billion-dollar acquisitions and charitable foundations and Manhattan penthouses. Marcus Bennett wasn't just someone important. Marcus Bennett was one of the richest men in America, and according to the photograph, he had once loved her mother. Lily didn't fully understand what she was looking at, but she understood one thing. If this man had enough money to buy buildings, he had enough money to help her mom. She just had to find him. It took 3 days. 3 days of sneaking onto library computers, of copying down addresses, of memorizing bus routes she had no business memorizing. 3 days of planning the most important trip of her young life. On the morning of the 4th day, while Clara was at the clinic receiving her weekly treatment, Lily packed a small backpack. She put in her favorite stuffed rabbit, a granola bar, and the photograph of her mother with Marcus. She wrote a note and left it on the kitchen table. "Mom's sick, so I came. I'm finding help. I love you. Don't be scared." And then Lily Bennett Simmons, age 7, got on a bus heading to New York City. The journey took 8 hours. Lily had never traveled alone before, never been in a city bigger than Columbus. The bus was crowded and smelled like fast food and gasoline. The man next to her snored the entire way. She was hungry, she was scared. But every time she wanted to cry, she thought about her mother lying in that hospital bed, and she found the strength to keep going. She arrived in Manhattan just as the sun was setting. The city was overwhelming. All those lights, all those people, all those cars honking and pushing past her like she was invisible. She had an address written on a piece of notebook paper. Bennett Industries Headquarters, 450 Park Avenue. It took her 2 hours to find it. She got lost 3 times, asked directions from a hot dog vendor who looked at her like she was crazy, and nearly stepped into traffic more than once. But finally, there it was, a tower of glass and steel stretching up toward the clouds, the word Bennett glowing in gold letters above the entrance. She walked through the revolving doors and into a lobby that was bigger than her entire apartment building. Marble floors, chandeliers, security guards in black suits with earpieces. Everyone looked important, everyone looked busy, and everyone ignored the small girl in the second-hand coat clutching a worn photograph in her hand. She approached the front desk where a woman with perfect hair was typing something on a computer. The woman didn't look up. "Excuse me," Lily said. Her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. "I need to see Marcus Bennett." The woman paused, looked down, raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Mr. Bennett doesn't take walk-in visitors. Do you have an appointment?" Lily shook her head. "No, but it's important. My mom is sick, and I need to talk to him." The woman's expression softened slightly, but only slightly. "I'm sorry to hear that, honey, but I can't just let you up to the executive floor. Is there an adult with you? A parent?" "My mom is the reason I'm here. Please, I just need 5 minutes." The woman sighed. She picked up a phone, murmured something into it, then hung up and gave Lily a sympathetic smile. "Security is going to come help you find your parents, okay? I'm sure they're very worried about you." Lily's heart sank. She was so close, and now they were going to send her away, and her mother was going to die, and everything would have been for nothing. "Please," she said again, her voice cracking, "please. I came all the way from Ohio. I don't have anyone else. He's the only person who can help." "Who's the only person who can help?" The voice came from behind her, deep, warm, familiar in a way that made Lily's breath catch in her throat. She turned around, and there he was, Marcus Bennett, older than the photograph, with threads of gray at his temples and tired lines around his eyes. But unmistakably him, the same dark eyes, the same strong jaw, the same face that her mother stared at in the middle of the night when she thought no one was watching. He was looking at Lily with a mixture of confusion and concern, and something else, something she couldn't quite name. "Who are you?" he asked gently. "And who is your mother?" Lily reached into her backpack. She pulled out the photograph. She held it up so he could see. "Her name is Clara," she said. "Clara Simmons. And she told me you used to love her." Marcus Bennett's face went white. The security team wanted to call the police. Marcus stopped them. He knelt down in front of this strange, brave, impossible child, looking at the photograph in her hand, a photograph he had taken himself a lifetime ago on a perfect autumn day when he believed his future was limitless. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "From my mom's room. She keeps it hidden, but I know where everything is." "Your mom." He could barely form the words. "Clara is your mother," Lily nodded. "She's sick, really sick. And we don't have any money for the doctors, and we're getting kicked out of our apartment, and she's too tired to work anymore, and I didn't know who else to ask." She paused. "Are you my daddy?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He staggered backward, his mind reeling. The math was doing itself in his head. Lily looked about 7, which meant she was born about 8 years ago, which meant, "Oh, God," he breathed. "Oh, my God." He hadn't known. All this time, all these years, he hadn't known. Clara had been pregnant when she left. Clara had been carrying his child. And she had raised that child alone, in poverty, in hiding, while he had become a billionaire. "What's your birthday?" he asked, his voice shaking. "February 14th, Lily said. "Valentine's Day. Mommy says I was her best present ever." Marcus closed his eyes. Valentine's Day. Almost exactly 9 months after Clara had disappeared. It was unmistakable, undeniable. This was his daughter. His daughter, who had traveled alone from Ohio to New York. His daughter, who had walked into a building full of strangers to ask for help. His daughter, who was standing in front of him right now, looking at him with eyes that were his own eyes, waiting for him to do something. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry or scream. He didn't know how to process the collision of emotions erupting inside him, joy and grief and fury and wonder, all tangled together into something he couldn't name. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was going to find Clara. He was going to find out what had happened. And he was going to make sure that his daughter, never spent another moment wondering if anyone cared about her. "Lily," he said, testing the name on his tongue, loving the way it felt. "I need you to tell me everything. Where is your mother right now? Where have you been living? And how—" His voice broke. "How did this happen?" For the next hour, Lily told him everything she knew. The moving, the jobs, the bills, the sickness, the hospital visits, the eviction notice. She didn't understand all of it, couldn't explain the parts that didn't make sense, but she told him everything she had observed through 7 years of watching and listening and being braver than any child should have to be. And when she was done, Marcus made a phone call. "Cancel everything on my schedule for the next week, I don't care what it is, and get the jet ready. We're going to Ohio." They found Clara at a pharmacy, not the hospital, not the apartment. She had already been evicted by then, her few belongings stuffed into garbage bags and taken to a motel on the edge of town. She had gone to the pharmacy to buy diapers. Not for Lily. Lily was 7, long past diapers. But there was a family at the motel, a young mother with twins who couldn't afford to buy her own. Clara had offered to help, because that was who Clara was. Even when she had nothing, she gave. Marcus stood at the end of the aisle watching her count those coins, watching her hands shake, watching the love of his life reduced to poverty and illness while he had been living in marble towers, drowning in wealth he didn't know how to spend. The fury came first, white-hot and blinding. Not at Clara, never at Clara, but at whatever circumstances, whatever forces, had conspired to separate them, to hide his daughter from him, to leave the woman he loved struggling alone while he signed billion-dollar contracts and attended charity galas. Then came the grief. 8 years. 8 years of birthdays he had missed. 8 years of first words and first steps and first days of school. 8 years of his daughter's life, lived without him. And finally, crushing and overwhelming, came the love. It rushed back like a wave he had been holding against a dam for nearly a decade. He had never stopped loving Clara. He had tried. God, how he had tried. He had dated other women, even come close to proposing to one of them, but none of them were her. None of them ever would be. "Clara," he said. She dropped the coins. They scattered across the linoleum floor like tiny silver promises, rolling away in every direction. She turned, and when she saw him, her face went through a dozen emotions in the span of a heartbeat. Shock, fear, disbelief, hope, anguish, and, finally, devastation. "Marcus." Her voice was barely a whisper. "How did you—" And then she saw Lily peeking out from behind his legs, and she understood. "Baby!" she gasped, rushing forward, falling to her knees, pulling Lily into her arms. "Oh, my God, baby, you scared me so much. I woke up and you were gone, and I thought... I had to find help, Mommy." Lily's voice was muffled against her mother's shoulder. "You're too sick, and I didn't know what else to do." Clara was crying now, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. She held her daughter like she would never let go, like she was afraid that if she loosened her grip for even a moment, everything would disappear. Marcus knelt down beside them. His throat was tight. His eyes were burning. He had 1,000 questions, 1,000 accusations, 1,000 words he wanted to say. But all that came out was, "Why didn't you tell me?" Clara looked up at him. Her face was wet with tears, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "I wanted to," she said. "Every single day I wanted to, but I couldn't. She made me promise. She made me sign." "Who?" Marcus demanded. "Who made you promise?" Clara didn't answer, but she didn't have to, because suddenly, like pieces of a puzzle snapping together, Marcus understood. His mother. The confrontation happened 3 days later. Marcus had insisted that Clara and Lily come back to New York with him. He set them up in the finest hospital in Manhattan with the best oncologists in the country. He hired a lawyer to review the contract Victoria had forced Clara to sign, and then, once he was sure his daughter and her mother were safe, he went to see the woman who had orchestrated their misery. Victoria Bennett lived in the same Upper East Side mansion where Marcus had grown up. 18,000 square feet of cold elegance, where children were to be seen and not heard, where love was a transaction and family was a performance for the benefit of society pages. She was in the conservatory when he arrived, drinking tea and reading the Wall Street Journal. She looked up as he entered, her face betraying nothing. Not guilt, not fear, not surprise. "Marcus, what a pleasant surprise. I wasn't expecting you until—" "You knew." His voice was ice. "All these years you knew." Victoria set down her teacup. "Knew what, darling?" "Don't!" The word came out like a warning. "Don't you dare play games with me. I found her. I found Clara. And I found my daughter, the daughter you hid from me for 8 years. For a moment, Victoria's composure flickered. Just a moment. Then it was back, smooth and impenetrable as marble. "I was protecting you," she said. "That girl was never right for you. She came from nothing. She would have dragged you down, distracted you from your responsibilities. Everything I did was for the good of this family." "For the good of this family?" Marcus's voice rose. "You let my daughter grow up in poverty. You let the woman I loved struggle alone for nearly a decade. You let her get sick. She has cancer, Mother. She's been battling cancer without proper medical care because she was too afraid of you to ask for help." "She signed a contract," Victoria said calmly. "A legally binding agreement. I offered her money, and she took it. That was her choice." "Her choice?" Marcus laughed. But there was no humor in it. "Her father was dying. Her family was drowning in debt. You exploited her desperation. You manipulated her into giving up everything she loved because you couldn't stand the thought of your precious son marrying someone you deemed beneath him." Victoria's eyes hardened. "I built this empire. I shaped it into what it is today. I have sacrificed more than you will ever know to ensure that the Bennett name means something. I will not apologize for protecting our legacy from a gold-digging—" "She never asked me for money." Marcus cut her off, his voice low and dangerous. "Not once. In 3 years of being together did Clara ever ask me for a single cent. She worked 2 jobs while studying full-time. She refused gifts, refused help, refused anything that made her feel like she wasn't earning her own way. She is the most decent, most honest, most loving person I have ever known. And you took her from me because of your pride." Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but Marcus wasn't finished. "You took away my choice. You took away 8 years of my daughter's life. You took away the only woman I ever truly loved. And for what? So that I could marry Evelyn Crane and merge our banking portfolios? Is that what family means to you? The Crane merger would have secured the company for generations." "I don't care about the company," Marcus roared. "I never cared about the company. All I ever wanted was to build something of my own, something that mattered. But you took that too. You pushed me into a role I never wanted, surrounded me with people who only cared about what I could give them, and told me it was for my own good." He was shaking now, years of suppressed anger finally breaking free. Do you know what the worst part is? I believed you. For 8 years, I believed that Clara had left because she didn't love me. I blamed myself. I thought I wasn't enough, that I had done something wrong. And all that time, you knew exactly where she was. You watched me suffer, and you said nothing. Victoria's mask finally cracked, just slightly, just enough for Marcus to see the calculation beneath. I did what was necessary, she said quietly. One day, you'll understand. No, Marcus shook his head. I understand now. And I'm done. I'm done with this house, with this legacy, with everything you've built on lies and manipulation. I have a daughter, Mother, a brilliant, brave, beautiful daughter who loves her mother more than anything in this world. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for the time I lost with her. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and one more thing. That contract you made Clara sign, it's void. I had my lawyers review it. She was under duress, the terms were unconscionable, and the non-disclosure clause violates about a dozen statutes. It's worthless, just like everything else you built. He walked out of the mansion and never looked back. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change. Clara's treatment progressed better than anyone expected. The doctors Marcus had flown in were among the best in the world, and with proper care and resources, her prognosis improved dramatically. The cancer wasn't gone, not yet, but it was shrinking, retreating, giving ground. For the first time in a year, Clara began to believe she might actually survive. Lily blossomed in ways that made everyone's heart ache. She started at a new school, a good school, where she made friends and joined the science club and announced that she was going to be a doctor when she grew up, a doctor who helped kids with sick mommies. She had her own bedroom for the first time in her life, painted lavender, because that was her favorite color, with a window that looked out over Central Park. And Marcus. Marcus learned what it meant to be a father. It wasn't easy. He had missed too much, and Lily was already her own person, smart and independent, and wary of getting hurt. She didn't trust him right away. She didn't call him Dad for weeks. She tested him constantly, watching to see if he would leave the way she had always expected people to leave. But he didn't leave. He showed up day after day. He attended school plays and helped with homework and learned how to braid hair from YouTube tutorials. He sat by Clara's bed during her treatments and held her hand when the nausea became too much. He read Lily bedtime stories and listened to her theories about dinosaurs and let her paint his nails bright pink. Slowly, incrementally, they became a family. Clara and Marcus didn't rush into anything. Too much had happened. Too many years had passed. But the love that had been buried for so long refused to stay buried. They talked for hours about the past, about the pain, about the choices they had made, and the choices that had been made for them. They grieved together for the time they had lost. And they began tentatively to imagine a future together. 1 year later, Clara was declared cancer-free. They celebrated in the park, the three of them together, with ice cream and balloons, and a small golden retriever puppy that Marcus had gotten for Lily's 8th birthday. The autumn leaves were falling, painting the world in shades of amber and gold, and the air was crisp with the promise of new beginnings. Lily ran ahead with the puppy, her laughter echoing through the trees. Marcus and Clara walked behind, hand in hand, watching their daughter with identical expressions of wonder. "I still can't believe this is real," Clara said softly. "Some mornings I wake up and think I'm going to be back in that motel room, counting pennies, waiting for the other shoe to drop." Marcus squeezed her hand. "It's real? I promise you, it's real." "I'm sorry," her voice cracked, "for everything, for leaving, for not telling you about Lily, for—" "Stop." He turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. "You were protecting your family. You were doing what you thought was right with the impossible choices you were given. None of this was your fault, but you missed so much. And I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it, not because I have to, but because I want to. Because you and Lily are everything I never knew I was missing. Because every morning I wake up next to you is the best morning of my life. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Clara's breath caught. "Marcus, I should have done this 8 years ago," he said. "I should have fought harder, searched longer, refused to give up. But we can't change the past. We can only choose what happens next." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a single diamond that caught the autumn light like a captured star. "Clara Simmons, mother of my child, love of my life, bravest woman I've ever known, will you marry me?" She was crying. Of course she was crying. But these tears were different from all the others. Not grief, not pain, not fear. These tears were pure, unburdened joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, and then he kissed her, right there in the middle of Central Park, with their daughter watching from across the lawn, and the puppy barking with excitement, and the whole world spinning into something beautiful and new. The wedding was small, just close friends, a few colleagues Marcus actually trusted, and Clara's parents, who had flown in from Ohio, still amazed that their daughter had somehow ended up marrying one of the richest men in America. Lily was the flower girl. She took her job very seriously, scattering rose petals with the precision of a scientist conducting an experiment. When she reached the altar, she looked at her parents together at last, and smiled a smile that could have lit up the darkest night. The ceremony was simple. No society press, no extravagant displays, just two people who had found each other against impossible odds, promising to spend forever making up for lost time. Marcus wrote his own vows. 8 years ago I lost you. I spent every day of those 8 years trying to fill the hole you left behind, with work, with success, with all the things that were supposed to make me happy. Nothing worked. Nothing came close. Because the truth is, Clara, you were always my home. You were the place I belonged, the person I was meant to find. And even when I didn't know you were out there, some part of me was still searching, still waiting. He paused, glancing at Lily, who was watching with solemn attention. And now I have you both, a family I didn't know existed, a love I thought I had lost forever. I don't deserve the second chance. But I'm going to spend every day earning it. I'm going to be the husband you deserve and the father Lily needs. I'm going to love you both with everything I have, for as long as I live. Clara's vows were shorter. She wasn't a woman of many words, but the ones she spoke carried the weight of a decade of suffering and the hope of all the years to come. Marcus, you came back for me. When I was at my lowest, when I had nothing left to give, you found me. You didn't judge me or blame me or ask why. You just loved me. That's all I ever wanted. That's all I ever needed. And now I have it. I have you. I have our daughter. I have a future I never thought I would get to see. So this is my promise. I will never stop loving you. I will never stop fighting for this family. And I will never, ever let go again. They exchanged rings. They exchanged kisses. And as the small gathering burst into applause, Lily ran up the aisle and threw herself into their arms. "We're a real family now," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "A real, real family." "Yes, baby," Clara whispered, holding her close. "We finally are." Victoria Bennett did not attend the wedding. She had retreated to her mansion, surrounded by the cold elegance she had always preferred to genuine human connection. Some said she was bitter. Others said she was planning her next move. But Marcus didn't care. He had built something she could never understand, something that couldn't be measured in stock prices or merger agreements. He had built a family. Not the kind of family that existed for photo opportunities and business deals, but the kind that stayed up late telling stories, that laughed over burnt pancakes, that held each other through the hard times and celebrated the good. He resigned as CEO of Bennett Industries. He appointed a capable successor, someone who actually wanted the job, and turned his attention to what mattered. He started a foundation in Lily's name, dedicated to helping families who couldn't afford medical care. He invested in Clara's dream, a children's clinic that would provide free services to kids whose parents were struggling the way they once had. And every night, without fail, he tucked Lily into bed, read her a story, and told her the same thing. "You saved us, you know. You were so brave, coming all that way by yourself. You changed everything." Lily would smile, already half asleep. "I had to. Mommy was sick, so I came." Such simple words, such an enormous truth. A 7-year-old girl facing an impossible situation had done the only thing she could think to do. She had walked into a tower of glass and steel and asked for help. She had trusted a stranger with her mother's life. She had been braver than most adults would ever be. And in doing so, she had reunited a family that never should have been torn apart. She had brought two people back together who had never stopped loving each other. She had changed not just her own destiny, but the destinies of everyone around her. Some people wait their whole lives for a hero. For Lily Bennett, she simply became one. 3 years later, Lily had a little brother. They named him James, after Clara's father, who had passed away the year before. He had been so proud of his daughter, so amazed at how her story had turned around. He got to walk her down the aisle. He got to hold his grandson. He got to die knowing that Clara was safe, loved, and finally happy. Marcus sometimes thought about how close they had all come to missing this. If Lily hadn't found that photograph, if she hadn't been brave enough to make the journey, if Clara's illness had progressed just a little faster, or if Marcus had chosen to take a different route that night at the pharmacy. So many tiny moments strung together like beads on a string. So many opportunities for everything to go wrong, but it hadn't. Against all odds, against all expectations, they had found their way back to each other. And now, sitting on the porch of their Connecticut home, watching Lily teach her little brother how to throw a baseball, Marcus understood something he had never fully grasped before. Money could buy many things: comfort, security, opportunity. But it could not buy what mattered most. It could not buy the sound of his daughter's laughter. It could not buy the feeling of his wife's hand in his. It could not buy the moment when his son took his first steps, wobbling toward him with arms outstretched. Those things, the real things, couldn't be purchased or acquired or negotiated. They could only be built. Day by day, moment by moment, through patience and presence and the quiet commitment to show up. Marcus had learned that lesson the hard way, but he had learned it. And he would never forget. This is a story about many things. It's about a mother who gave up everything to protect the people she loved. It's about a father who got a second chance he never expected. It's about the lies we tell to survive and the truths that eventually set us free. But most of all, it's about a little girl. A little girl who loved her mother more than she feared the unknown. A little girl who saw a problem and, instead of waiting for someone else to solve it, decided to solve it herself. A little girl who understood with the pure wisdom that only children possess that sometimes love means being brave enough to ask for help. Lily didn't know she was changing the world that day when she walked into Bennett Industries. She didn't know she was rewriting her family's history, correcting an injustice that had festered for 8 long years. She only knew that her mom was sick, and she needed to do something. Mom's sick, so I came. 5 words that changed everything. And in the end, isn't that what matters most? Not the grand gestures or the dramatic revelations, but the small, brave choices we make when everything seems hopeless. The decision to keep going when giving up would be easier, the courage to love, even when love has hurt us before. We are all capable of being heroes, not the kind that wear capes or possess supernatural powers, but the kind that show up, the kind that refuse to accept the unacceptable, the kind that walk through fear because someone they love is waiting on the other side. Lily taught her parents that lesson, and if you've made it this far in the story, perhaps she's taught you something too. Love doesn't guarantee an easy path, but it does guarantee that the path is worth walking. No matter how dark it gets, no matter how many obstacles appear, Love finds a way. It always finds a way. All you have to do is be brave enough to let it. Today, Lily Bennett is 10 years old. She still wants to be a doctor, specifically a pediatric oncologist who specializes in helping kids whose parents have cancer. She has her father's determination and her mother's compassion. She volunteers at the Clara Bennett Children's Clinic every Saturday, handing out stickers and making balloon animals for nervous patients. Clara runs the clinic full-time. Her health has remained stable, and she's channeled everything she experienced into making sure other families never have to face what she faced. The clinic has helped over 30,000 children in just 2 years. Marcus still writes checks, still makes phone calls, still uses his wealth and influence to open doors that would otherwise remain closed. But his favorite role isn't CEO or philanthropist, it's dad. It's the role he waited 8 years to play, and he plays it with everything he has. They are not a perfect family. They argue about homework and screen time. They disagree about politics at the dinner table. James throws tantrums, and Lily sometimes rolls her eyes like only a preteen can. Normal stuff, ordinary stuff, the kind of stuff that makes life messy and complicated and absolutely undeniably worth living. And every year, on February 14th, they celebrate two things: Valentine's Day and the birthday of the little girl who saved them all. Because that's the truth in the end. That's the real story. A billionaire saw a woman buying diapers with her last coins, and it broke open his entire world. But the real hero wasn't the billionaire with his jets and his lawyers and his millions. The real hero was a 7-year-old with a photograph, a bus ticket, and a heart full of impossible courage. Mom's sick, so I came, and that made all the difference. The pharmacy was nearly empty at 11:47 p.m. when she walked in. A woman in a faded coat, her shoulders hunched, her face pale with exhaustion. She moved slowly toward the baby aisle, her eyes scanning the prices with the kind of desperation that told a story before any words could. In her trembling hand, she clutched a small plastic bag, coins, quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies, every last cent she had left in this world. She didn't notice the man standing 3 aisles away, frozen in place,